Hey, there you are.
Hey, thanks for
I like
coming.
your hat, by the way.
I don't know what's wrong.
Can you hear me?
It's my end that's messed up.
Well, at least you have a nice hat. It's pretty.
It's my good luck hat. It's. Let me try something. All right, let's just continue.
Okay, so where are we going to pick up at?
We are going to continue. What are the board inspectors looking for? And since I'm on this weird echo, I'm going to mute myself while you're talking.
Okay, very good. So
And
we're
I'll
just
put questions. God, I don't know
Okay.
why this is doing this. Okay. So what
You
are
ready?
state board inspectors looking for?
The first item that they look for when they walk in is to see if you have counting tools and if they are marked for hazardous drugs only. The reason is hazardous drugs can only be used with hazardous. I'm sorry. Let me back up. The first item is making sure you have separate counting tools for your hazardous drugs. This is an actual requirement because they do not want to have any contamination going from hazardous drugs over to regular drugs. So they do need to be segregated or kept off to the first time was better. We're not live, right?
Oh, we are, but I don't think anybody's watching now.
Okay, that's good. Okay. The first thing is making sure that you have separate counting tools for your hazardous drugs. USB 800, as well as the NIOSH list, require separate counting tools to prevent cross contamination from drugs. The next thing the state board will ask, do you have your hazardous drugs intermingled within your inventory, or do you have them segregated? Now, from my point of view, it's best to have them segregated because how are the techs going to remember on a very busy day to remember that if they're intermingled, that this is a hazardous drug, and we have to go over and get the specific hazardous drug counting tools. In theory, it works, and I have a small chain we've worked with, and they said, "Oh, our software covers it. Everything's fine. They always will know." I gave them 3 weeks, and it didn't make it that long. So that's why you want to keep everything segregated, just so you don't get caught with a board inspector coming in and they're doing a hazardous regular drug on a regular counting tools and then moving into a hazardous drug on the same tray.
So
So again,
okay, so yeah, maybe you could elaborate a little bit more on the segregation. Do you mean keep them like in an entirely different section, all the hazardous drugs together?
yes, in one bin. They will fit all in one bin. The birth control tablets are the most bulky, and I always recommend putting them on the bottom shelf because there's normally more room down there. So the next thing that they look for is, do you have assessment of risk? This is actually the most important part of hazardous drugs and USP 800 for retail and long-term care pharmacy, and we'll cover this extensively on part 3. But they want to see, do you have them? Are they available? And they're on site. A lot of people won't keep them on site because they don't want to lose them. They have to be on site. They have to be signed annually. So you don't have to redo everything every year, but you have to review them and sign them annually. We have identified approximately 144 assessment of risks that are required in a normal retail or long-term care pharmacy. That's a lot of documents and to keep in your pharmacy. And we also recommend that you do all of the hazardous drugs with assessment of risk because your inventory is constantly changing. Drugs are coming, drugs are going out. You're never going to be in trouble for having every assessment of risk, but you could be in trouble if you don't have it. So, because at that point they can state board can say, well, you're out of compliance, you've contaminated your pharmacy, and when we use the word contaminated in pharmacy, they do not want to be mixed together.
It does not sound like a good mix. And I just want to also interrupt here and say that you said that assessment of risk is one of the biggest issues. So our final episode is dedicated just to that, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
The next thing they want to see is, do you have safety data sheets? Now, everybody in pharmacy now is familiar with safety data sheets. You have to have them for pharmacy if you have any compounding. You have to have them for DME if you went through accreditation and the quality standards there. There's this whole sort of regulations that come to apply to always talk about safety data sheets. We have to have them for the hazardous drugs. And what's important is they have to be available. You can have them manually or electronically. If you have them manually, it's just too much paper. And these things do change. If you have them electronically, especially if you hook back to an organization that maintains these or back to the individual manufacturer, if they change, you're automatically going to have them. The next thing they want to know is, okay, what do you do when you have an expired hazardous drug? Well, EPA made a great change, and that's kind of an oxymoron there, EPA making a great change. They have permitted that hazardous drugs, when they go expired, that you can work with your returns company. The pharmacy has to have a quarantine area, which you should have anyway. So you move your hazardous drugs into quarantine area, you contact your returns company, work with them, they will pick them up as expired hazardous drugs, take them back to their facility, and they will follow all the RCRA rules for hazardous waste. So it takes that burden off the pharmacy. It's okay if it costs a little bit more because the whole process of hazardous waste is so expensive. We don't want to go into that.
I'm going to interrupt with perhaps an irrelevant question, which is a lot of what you're saying I've also heard for controlled substances. It sounds like the processes are very similar. Is there any actual crossover that you can use in procedures or companies and things like that? So you're not doing like everything, like, one for hazardous drug, one entirely separate thing for hazardous drugs and one entirely separate things for controlled substances.
They're similar in the process, but with hazardous drugs, we don't have to worry about DEA. And all
right, of course. But I'm wondering, is it like the same company who would dispose of hazardous drugs, who could also be the one disposing of the controlled substances? Because you also have to have, a specific.
Where we're at today, yes. Yeah. So go from there.
Okay.
Sorry. And then finally, they want to know, where's your table 1 hazardous drugs kept? Are you using the manual pill counters, not the new scanners, but ones that you actually run through a machine and it manually counts them? Or if you went to a robot, if you use that, absolutely cannot use table 1 drugs in those type of units. Now, there's a number of scanners that have come out, started by Icon. Kirby Lister has come out. So the more everybody's moving to the scanner, which is more accurate, it's a lot easier, and it doesn't do any manual manipulation of the tablets or capsules. So they can we don't have to worry about dust and particles with that.
Okay, excellent. And then our last and final question is, are there any other inspections for hazardous drugs?
Yeah, it's really not inspections, but it's your accreditation organization. Now, a lot of pharmacies early on, back in 2009, we all went into accreditation for our DME POS products. And then the pharmacy exemption rule came out. And then most pharmacies have moved to the exemption rule, which is really great. You still have to do all the rules, but you don't have an accrediting body with a high fee coming in every 3 years to do this. But anyways, they will come in and they will look at what you have. Now, on the compounding side, if you're using an accrediting body for your non-sterile or your sterile compounding, they are looking at USP 800 right now, and they want to see they want to see your policies, and that's the biggest difference. The state board wants to see that you have them. The accrediting body will actually read them. So, and you want to make sure that your policy procedures, when they're written, either by you or someone else, that you can actually pick it up, read it, and perform the task. So that's kind of where I kept my background in the Air Force was we always had these rules. We had to follow them to the T, and then you had to make sure that those rules actually made sense and you could follow them. And then I got started into writing regulations because I frustrated a lot of people because I showed them why it didn't work. So, but those are at this point in time. There's where we're at. Also, on the accrediting bodies, they want to see your hazardous communication plan. They want to see your training records, and you are required to have training for hazardous communications, which include hazardous drugs now.
Okay. Excellent. Well, that does end us. So thank you very much for your time, and sorry for the problems. I'm going to put this together in a podcast that makes sense, which will go out next week. And if anybody is still listening, again, our next session will be March 10th, and hopefully it will be one continuous session.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks very much, Jeff. And again, apologies for the technical difficulties and the echo.
Okay. If you're not prepared for challenges, you shouldn't be doing podcasts or technology. So when you release that, can you share that link to me?
Absolutely.
Okay, that way we'll get it out to our clients, and we have a podcast network also. We'll get it out on that.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks very much. I hope you weather the storm well.
Okay. Thank you much. I'll talk to you soon. Have a great day.
Okay. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.